Welcome to day 30 of our 30-day watercolor challenge. Oh my god, I can't believe we are hitting the 30-day mark. On this last day, we are going to paint this beautiful clear blue lake surrounded by mountains. The colors you will need are turquoise blue, indigo, sap green, cobalt green or any other pastel blue or green. The cobalt green I will be using for this class is from Magello Mission, and that is the shade I will be using for the lake to get that clear blue lake. So if you don't have cobalt green, you can use a lighter version of turquoise blue. You will also need burnt sienna and Payne's grey. Let's start with the pencil sketch. I'm going to start by adding a line a little above the center of the paper, and I'm going to add some mountains over here. These are our snowy mountains. Maybe one more on the right. Now adding another big one in front of those mountains on the right side. Similarly, I will be adding one more on the left. Okay, so that's the one on the left. Now in front of that, I'm going to add another one. Now from here, I'm going to add a road. A very thin curvy road which is just enveloping that mountain. Now I'm going to take it to the other end. So that's our pencil sketch. Maybe I will add a tiny mountain over here. Take your time. Maybe you can pause it here and draw the sketch and join me once I start painting. Okay, so I'm going to start by applying an even coat of water onto the sky. We are going with a very dramatic cloudy sky. Okay, so there is an even coat of water on the sky. Now I'm switching to my round brush and I'm going to add the clouds first. The color that I'm using here is indigo. I'm going with a lighter tone of indigo. Now this is actually the shadow of the clouds. You just need to take your brush in any kind of pattern or shape you want to. Maybe you can add a bigger cloud like I'm adding here, or you can go with some tiny ones. I'm adding some onto the top as well, and that's it. Now I'm going to clean my brush and I'm going to switch to turquoise blue. I'm going with the medium tone and I'm going to apply that around the shape we added. You can see in between I'm leaving some white gaps. That is my clouds. What we added earlier was the shadow of the clouds. You can see how nicely our clouds are taking shape. Earlier we just added the shadow and we left that white gap in between, and we are adding the sky color, and slowly our sky is transforming. Okay, so that is our sky. Now let's wait for that to dry. Meanwhile, let's paint the water. I'm adding a clean coat of water first. Now the two shades I'm going to use for the water is turquoise blue and cobalt green. The turquoise blue I'm using here is from White Nights. I'm going to add that right underneath the mountains. You can see the tone I'm using. I went in with a medium tone of turquoise blue. So this is going to be our darker tone of the lake. We won't be adding any reflection. Now I'm going with this pastel blue. This one is cobalt green by Magello Mission. It's that perfect color for those tropical lake and beaches. Now blend those two colors well, and as you come down, you can make the color lighter by adding a little of water. So I was googling about these tropical beaches and lakes. Why don't they reflect? It seems their temperature is below 4 degrees Celsius, and when it reaches a particular temperature, it is no longer flat. The top surface of the water is solid and it is not flat anymore, and it loses the property of reflecting. So this is what I read. At least some of you would wonder why I'm not adding reflection. So that is the reason why I shared this little information. You could read about it more. Alright, our sky has completely dried. You can see those fluffy white clouds there. Now I'm going to paint those mountains. Again, I'm going with indigo. I'm going to paint some snowy mountains. So I made a lighter tone of indigo. Now I'm switching to my smaller size brush, as the mountains are quite far from you and the details you're adding should be very thin and delicate. Now using a lighter tone of indigo, I'm going to add some tiny lines on the top. So this snowy mountain is not like the ones we did earlier. This one is going to be a little more detailed one. The first step is to add some tiny lines using a lighter tone of indigo onto the top area of the mountain. You can do that for all the mountains you have there. Just add some messy tiny lines. Make sure you're going with a lighter tone of indigo. We have one more mountain left on the right side. Let me do the same for that one as well. Okay, now we need to add the darker tones. Now I'm going with a much more darker tone of indigo. And I'm going to add that over the bottom of those mountains. I'm going to add a solid shade over the bottom. I will be taking the shade almost till the middle of those mountains. Now I'm going to take out my paper towel and I'm going to dab my brush on a paper towel to remove the excess amount of water. Now I'm again adding some lines over here so that it smoothly goes with the lines we have added earlier. Now over to the bottom, I'm going to make my indigo a bit more deeper. I'll just drop in that over here. Now smudge that again. Either you can smudge that with dry brush patterns or you just need to add some teeny tiny lines. This doesn't need to be perfect. We don't need a smooth blend over here. I'm adding a little more deeper tone over the bottom. Okay, so that is my first mountain. Now I'm going to repeat the same for the other three ones we have there. Starting with that deeper tone of indigo over the bottom. Now over the top, I will make the color a little more lighter, and then using tiny lines and dry brush patterns, I will smudge that with the lines we have added on the top so that we don't have a clear separation between those snow and the bottom shade. I added the deeper tone. Now I'm going to dip my brush in a little of water and I'm going to wash up the darker tone and I'm going to make the tone lighter. Now using that lighter tone, I'm going to add some tiny lines. So all you need to do is add some teeny tiny lines so that you have a natural progression from the snow to the bottom shade. As I mentioned earlier, you don't need to have a smooth blend or a smooth progression here. It can be rough, it can be more textured, which will make your snowy mountain look more realistic. Okay, so that is the second one. Now I'm going to repeat the same for the other two mountains. For the next two mountains, I'm going with one tone lighter than the indigo we used for the first two mountains. After I add that shade over the bottom, I will repeat the same process of adding lines. The previous ones we did were completely covered in snow. The ones we are doing now, it's a snow-capped mountain. So I have added a medium tone of indigo over the bottom. Now I'm adding lines and smudging that into the background so that the top and the bottom doesn't look like two separate divisions. Okay, so that is our snowy mountain. Now let's paint the other two mountains. I'm starting with the darker tone of indigo on the top. I will be doing the same for the other mountain as well. After I'm done with this, I will be switching to sap green and I will be adding sap green over the bottom. Now rather than taking your mountain in a smooth curve, you can add some lines on the top so that it looks like there are some trees far away. The remaining, I'm going to add sap green. Blend those colors well and just fill up the bottom in sap green. Do the same for the other mountain as well. Now let me add those lines for this mountain using indigo. Just some random lines. Go with different heights. Okay, so those are our green mountains. Now our snowy mountains has completely dried. I'm going to add some dry brush patterns onto that to make it look more interesting. I'm using Payne's Grey and I'm using my smaller size brush. I'm dabbing my brush on a paper towel to remove the excess amount of water so that I will get perfect dry strokes. You just need to add very little dry brush patterns onto your mountain. Don't add a lot. These are just to give a finished look to your mountains. We don't need a lot of lines. So most of the techniques we are using in this painting is what we explored earlier. It's actually an implementation of the techniques we learned. So this painting is not complex, it is just that we have more elements in this painting. Okay, so the mountains are done. Now using paint gray, I'm going to add some teeny tiny trees at the bottom. So all you need to do is just add a drop kind of a shape, and these are the trees which are very far from us. Now add in as many as you want. You can go with some taller ones and some shorter ones. Don't fill up the entire line in trees, leave some gap in between. Now once you have done adding them on the bottom line of the mountain, you can add them on the surface of the mountain. Just some teeny tiny lines. You can see the size of my lines. They are very tiny. This will make it look like there are so many trees on the surface of the mountain. Okay, so that is our snowy mountain. I'm going to add a tiny patch of land over here and adding some trees on it. Okay, so these kind of little details will add a lot of character to your painting, and that is why I added those little trees on top of the mountain. Now in a similar way, let's add some trees onto the green mountain as well. I'm going with a deeper tone of green. I mix a little of indigo into sap green to get a deeper tone. Now in a similar way, I'm adding those drop kind of a shape over the bottom line. In between, I will go with some pine trees also, some vague shape of pine trees. Remember, we tried this earlier. We added a line and then we added those zigzag lines to create the foliage of the tree. I think it was that snowy mountain exercise. We did the same kind of tree. I'm going to add similar kind of trees over here. You can see how gorgeous our lake and those mountains are looking already. Now I'm going with a light tone of paint gray and I'm going to paint the road in a grayish tone. Fill up that entire road in a gray color. I used a lighter tone of paint gray. Now the last step is to paint this mountain at the bottom. I'm going to start with a lighter tone of burnt sienna. I'm going to add that on the top of the mountain we have on the left side. When I'm adding burnt sienna, I'm deliberately leaving some gaps in between. Now over to that gaps, I will be adding sap green. I'm loading my brush with sap green. Now adding that onto the brown background. Just dropping that in. Now that will smoothly blend into the brown background. You can add in some darker tones in between. Okay, so that is the base layer of our mountain. Do you guys remember the cliff and the ocean we painted? I'm going to use the same technique over here. Once I'm done with the base layer with sap green and burnt sienna, I will be adding more darker tones and also I will be adding some dry patterns onto this. So my intention here is to create more and more textures on this mountain because this one is in the foreground. We need to have more details on this. I'm going with a much more deeper tone of sap green and I'm going to apply that over the bottom. The background shades are still wet, so it is easy for me to blend this into the background. You can see it's a medium tone, it's not too deep. Now over here I'm going to add those lines to replicate the trees. Just some teeny tiny lines. Okay, so that is my base layer. Now once this dries, we'll come back with the dry patterns. Meanwhile, let's paint the other bit on the bottom. I'm going with the same steps. I'm starting with burnt sienna, adding that. Then in between, I'm going to add some sap green. Okay, so that is the base layer. Now I'm going to drop in more darker tones of green onto this wet background to add more textures over here. Just add some dots or tiny lines or some patterns or whatever you want to add. It doesn't matter what are you really adding over there. Our background is wet, so whatever you are adding will nicely blend into the background, leaving more textures. And that's done. Now it's time to add the dry brush patterns. I'm going with a medium tone of sap green. I'm dabbing my brush on a paper towel. I'm using my bigger size brush so that I can create pattern on a larger area in a single time. And I'm adding those dry brush patterns on the left side of the mountain. Go in a very random manner and add in as many as you want. Be a little careful not to add any patterns onto the lake. Now in a similar manner, I'm going to add dry brush patterns on that section on the right as well. So on this side, I want to make my land look like it is sloping. So I'm taking my brush in an inclined manner. Okay, now I'm switching to my smaller size brush and I'm going with a deeper tone of green. And I'm making this line more prominent. Add a darker tone over the bottom line. You can add some teeny tiny lines in an inclined manner and smudge that into the background. Now the last step is to add trees over this line. I'm going with a deeper tone of green. I'm mixing sap green with indigo. Now just like how we added those drop shape earlier, I'm going to add similar shape on either side of the road. I'll start with the left side first. With this painting, we are finishing our 30-day watercolor challenge. I'm really grateful to everyone who joined me so far. Don't worry at all if you didn't get a perfect result. It took me 3 years to reach this point where I am right now, and I still consider myself to be an intermediate artist. Please don't give up, keep trying until you get your result perfect. It might take years. I'm not saying you will get it right in 5 or 6 tries, maybe it will take 10 or 20 times. But don't give up. Now I'm adding some tiny ones to the other side of the road. You can see I'm simply adding a tiny line. I'm really loving the way this painting is progressing. Now just like we added those tiny trees on the snowy mountain, I'm going to add similar trees on either side. Just some teeny tiny lines with a medium tone of sap green. So if I talk a little more about me, I became a career artist exactly a year back. This month I'm actually celebrating my 1-year anniversary of becoming a career artist. I'm an architect by profession, but last year I chose to quit my job and try my hands on being a career artist. And when I look back, I couldn't be more happier than this. I made the right decision by quitting my desk job. So your choices are just like the road we see here. You never know what is waiting for you on the other side. Whether it's a dead end or whether it's a more scenic place, you never know what is there. I know at least one person watching my class right now would be thinking of becoming a career artist. I would say take a chance and try it out. But before that, be confident with your skills. Paint as many as you can. Try out all the techniques. Be the best version of yourself and create a unique identity. I must say each of you have done a wonderful job and I love the way each of you are progressing. I was looking at some of your profiles just to know how much you improved from your previous paintings to what you're painting right now, and it is giving me goosebumps. Really, I'm loving the way you guys have progressed. I'm very sure a consistent practice can make you reach your goals, so don't quit, keep practicing. Here is our finished painting. I really love the colors in this painting. That clear blue lake and those snowy mountains and the green mountain. I'm really happy to finish our challenge with this pleasant and beautiful painting. Thank you so much for joining me on this 30-day art journey. I hope you had a great time doing this watercolor workout with me.